Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for making AP Human Geography a part of your day. We're just going to briefly summarize the second part of Key Issue 10.1, and that is to classify agricultural regions. And then the second part of the day is we're going to look at Key Issue 10.2 to evaluate why people consume different foods. So let's go ahead and knock this out, my friends. Well, that's not the right slide. All you can eat. No, 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 no. It's actually all you can know quiz is going to be upcoming completely free where you can bring in everything that you read about in your textbook, things that you've noted and compiled in your 3-hole punch binder, and lastly, whatever notes that you've taken, including this slideshow. So after you've had a day of instruction in Key Issue 10.1 and also wrapping up this lesson here in Key Issue 10.2, we are looking ahead toward having an all-you-can-note quiz, bringing whatever you want at your disposal. Key issues are included, so that's kind of nice. Okay, LDCs are home to 97% of the world's farmers. Wow, that's a big number. And they differentiate. LDCs mostly have subsistence agriculture. That would differ from MDCs and commercial agriculture in 4 main ways. One is the purpose. The second is the percentage of farmers in the labor force. Third is the use of machinery. And fourth is farm size. If you don't mind, I'd like to get into more depth on each and every one of these things, starting off with the purpose of farming. But before we do that, we're always asking 2 questions: where and why? And when we look at the world's subsistence agriculture, we can see a lot of them in the underdeveloped world: Central, South America, Sub-Saharan Africa, East Asia, Southeast Asia. And again, in subsistence agriculture, we are focusing on producing food for survival, to subsist, if you will. So let's look at the purpose. Again, subsistence farms produce food to subsist. The good folks at Rallies tell me on their commercials, you got to eat. And with subsistence farms, sometimes you may be able to have a surplus of a particular crop. Maybe you want to then go cash crop route. Shouts out to W.W. Rostow, thinking about maybe stage 2 of Rostow's development model, trying to find something that you could produce at a higher quality and a lower cost than other people in the international trade game. Maybe you have one spouse focus on commercial agriculture while the other one does subsistence agriculture. But we know realistically that LDCs can often face things: pestilence, famine, drought, natural disasters. So the main thing they're focusing on is living and subsisting off their own farm. Contrast that with commercial agriculture. We're growing crops and raising animals for selling, for the express purpose of sale off the farm. That's a big shift from subsistence farming, and there's some major differences between the two, and I want to walk through some of them as we move forward. The one thing I would tell you is when we look at percentage of the farmers in the labor force, the number of farmers in the United States is less than 2%. MDCs generally are looking at about 5% of the workforce engaged in agriculture. That's been a huge shift. There's 85% fewer farmers in the year 2000 as we turn the century than there was in 1900. It's pretty much leveled off since about 1980, by the way. The number of farms in the United States, in 1940, there were 6 million farms. By 1960, just 20 years later, there's 4 million farms. And 20 years later, in 1980, there were 2 million farms. So the number of farmers and the number of farms have both decreased. People have been pushed by decreasing opportunities on the farm, pulled by maybe higher wages, maybe new opportunities outside of agriculture. So you have kind of a two-way connection there between things luring people into urban areas, namely for the sake of economic opportunity, and pushing people, repelling people from some of these jobs that they used to work in agriculture. Let's contrast that with LDCs. when we look at LDCs, for sure, we see a larger percentage, significantly larger percentage of the workforce engaged in agriculture. So, um, that is a major difference that you want to then notice, but also understand the reasons why there's been such a substantial decrease in agriculture as it relates to MDCs. Having said that, as the number of farms and farmers have decreased, the output has actually dramatically increased, which is kind of wild. Here's a graph showing the percentage of farmers in the labor force. Look, uh, it's higher in the developing countries, in the LDCs, and it's lower in the developed countries. One of the reasons for that is the use of machinery. When we go back and we look at just some of the basic ideas of the use of machinery, um, whether or not it be, when we think of technology, sometimes we think of like, smartphones and laptops and all sorts of these new 21st century innovation. I'll tell you what was an awesome piece of technology. How about the all iron plow in the 1770s? That was a game changer because before that, people had to make their farm equipment from wood, and wood is good, but man, I tell you what, the plow was a game changer. From that later on, there have been other innovations that have made the MDC farmer less dependent on animal power, less dependent on even human power. Corn pickers, planters, combines, tractors. We're going to show you many YouTube clips of some of this technology in action. It is flat out astounding and amazing. There's one I could show you of a self-driving tractor put together by John Deere. Quite amazing when you see some of this innovation. I mean, we think of self-driving cars, and Elon Musk getting wild on a podcast or something like that. Well, how about John Deere's coming in with the self-driving tractor, and also GPS that determines the precise coordinates for exactly how to do some of this stuff, how much fertilizer to put, where to put that. See, in LDCs, they're still using mostly hand tools, human power, animal power. And when we look at some of the innovation and the inventions that have facilitated the use of machinery in MDC agriculture, we got to start with transportation. Right. So, in the 1800s, we had railroads, and that was cool. And then in the 1900s, we had highways. And that was cool. And then we used those highways in the interstate highway system to transport goods via trucks. Okay, that's fine. Then I don't know. I got an idea. Let's put refrigerators on the trucks and make a refrigerated truck. Now we can transport things further and faster, and food stays better longer. It's quite amazing how that was able to happen. Moving forward, let's look at some of the scientific advances, right? When we look at new fertilizers, new herbicides, new hybrid plants, new animal breeds, new farming practices, ways to produce higher crop yields, ways to get healthier animals, all that is, certainly been facilitated by an increased understanding scientifically of agriculture. A lot of people were predicting a food crisis. Some of these people, like no offense, Paul Ehrlich, but he's predicting calamity again. This is kind of a recurring theme for him. A lot of these people were predicting the running out of food in the 60s and 70s. What made that kind of not a reality was the green revolution, thinking of all these herbicides and fertilizers and ways to increase crop yields. Miracle wheat, miracle corn, miracle rice. These are all things that increased the output of food. And the last thing we would say, electronics. We also made a brief mention of GPS and how it's facilitating the increase of agricultural output, right? Okay, see, you got to have a big field in order to make some of these possible, yeah, you might see I don't know, maybe like a Porsche zooming down the road, and you say, "Man, that's an awesome Porsche." For me, I'm kind of like mid 30s. I like sedans. I see an Audi A8, and then my antennas. I'm kind of keen on that Audi A8. I'll set you back $88,000 BTW. But yeah, I see one of those, and I think, man, that's a nice car, a Corvette. Awesome. Tell you what, man, you see a combine going down the road? That combine's worth way more than that Porsche. That combine's worth way more than that Corvette. That combine's worth way more than that high-end Audi A8 with all the options. But the thing about those combines, you see, it takes money to make money. In MDCs, they have the capital to be able to purchase machines like this, but it wouldn't do them any good unless they had absolutely huge, extensive areas on which to farm. So you're talking about bang for your buck there, right? You need these big machines to help with big yards, just as you might need a humongous one of these lawnmowers if you have many acres in which to cut lawns, right? That would make sense. But a guy with a little bit of yard, he might only need like a little push behind, right? I've seen a couple of these guys in these little bitty yards have like these zero turns. It gives a new definition to zero turn because they literally have to turn like 0 times. They're just one straight line and they're done with their yard. It's like, man, just get yourself a push mower for $85 down there at the Sears. Well, Sears is out of business. Never mind. Contrast this and listen, these combines are reaping, threshing, and clearing all in a single operation. Wow, that's amazing. Wow, that's amazing. But on the flip side, you do this all by hand and it takes more power. It takes more effort and it takes longer, quite frankly, and it's much less efficient. However, this piece of wooden, whatever threshing is being done there costs significantly less than the combine that was the aforementioned technology. Looking at acres per tractor. This one happens to be in hectares because the author of your textbook so loves to be a hipster. When we look at farmers in the LDCs, right, they have less acres. When we look at farmers in the MDCs, they have more acres per tractor. So it makes it possible for commercial farmers to farm these extensive areas, right? Because they have the machinery that's able to work with this. Checking that out. Man, look at those carrots, man. I mean, again, it takes money to make money, but if you have the capital to be able to get one of these machines, you can really significantly increase your yield and do more for less. The last thing is farm size. We'll make it real simple on you. Sorry about mismanaging that there. Here we go. Farm size is certainly smaller in LDCs. And in addition to that, you have humongous plots of land, hundreds of acres for your average commercial farm. The average commercial farm in the United States is over 400 acres. Let that sink in. Wow. And some of that large size obviously depends on the mechanization that we were talking about, right? So all those combines, they operate most efficient at very large scales, and their considerable expense could not be justified for one of these smaller farms like the average farm size 2.5 acres in China. So, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy or rent that machinery in MDCs. And, you got to, I mean, I don't know about you, but, typically what happens there is if you're a farmer, you don't just, pay that down in cash unless you're seriously keen in on some Dave Ramsey or something. You borrow that from a bank and you resell, or excuse me, you repay that after your output is sold. Okay. One key stat that I think is kind of wild in the United States, the largest 5% of farms produce 75% of the country's total agriculture. That is humongous, right? And we're making land farmable that was otherwise not farmable. We're reclaiming land. This land reclamation is being done through irrigation and some other strategies to make land farmable that was once not farmable. With the word we use there is arable. Okay, awesome. Seeing some of the differences there between machine power and human power. All right, excellent. Again, thinking about how big some of the farmlands are. The largest 5% of farms produce 75% of the country's total agriculture. Wow, that's stunning. All right, my friends. I want to move on to why do people consume different foods. This should move very quickly, but here we're just going to evaluate some of the differences between developed and developing countries in terms of food consumption, and we'll look at global distribution of undernourishment with the transfer goal of understanding how all this relates to your world. We are back with it. So, why do people consume different foods? Couple things we need to look at. We need to define dietary energy consumption, the amount of food that an individual consumes. Okay, in order to do that, the unit that we use to measure that is the calorie. So, whether or not it be a gram or an ounce of each food source, that's going to deliver a calorie level that then we can measure. An individual can measure, a nutritionist can measure, things along that line. So here's the two big differences. When we look at the MDC world and the LDC world, there's a couple of big differences. One, in terms of total amounts of calories, MDCs are getting more. And then the source of nutrients. Where are you getting these calories from? And we do look at MDCs versus LDCs, the physical conditions, right? Like, how does climate affect all that? And the third would be your culture. Like, is there a reason why you're not consuming particular food? Is there a reason why someone in Southwest Asia would not consume pork? Is there a reason why someone in India would not consume beef, and having those conversations? So the first thing we have to look at is how much food is consumed. Well, if we start off with this idea that the average person is going to need about 1,800 calories a day, right? Then we consume on average about 3,800 calories a day in the MDC world. This is at least according to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization. So they evaluate this and they say, okay, MDCs are consuming quite a bit. There's also something I read that said 3,600 calories a day. That may be more accurate. So that's about what you're looking at there. 36 to 3,800 calories per day. In LDCs, the number dips to about 2,600. Having said that, if you need 1,800 to survive, okay, if the UN Food and Agriculture Organization says an individual needs to consume about 1,800 per day, right? And MDCs are getting 36 to 3,800, and LDCs are getting 2,600. Tell you what, my friends, we're getting more than what we need. The problem is there are some communities that are not. There are some areas of the world that are not, and it's not so much getting the lack of calories. It's where do those calories come from? Are your macronutrients diversified enough? And what does that look like from a perspective of malnutrition? So diets are more likely to be deficient in countries where people have to spend a high percentage of their income to obtain food, or a high percentage of their time. So looking by source, wheat, rice, and corn. These are the three main sources of calories. Let's examine all three of these, but seeing where corn, kind of that yellowish right there, Central America, large portions of sub-Saharan Africa. Wheat is in North America, huge chunks of South America, North Africa, Central, Southwest Asia, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Russia, Central Asia, and parts of South Pacific, whereas we have rice in South Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia. Okay, let's examine each and every one of these. First of all, these are called cereal grains. Most people get most of their calories through these cereal grains. If that helps you, like all the cereal is, by the way, I don't want you to think like it's got to be like the Cinnamon Toast Crunch or something along that line. All the cereal is, by the way, is just a grass that yields grain for food. So grain is the seed from a cereal grass. So the three leading cereal grains are wheat, rice, and maize. That's 90% of all grain consumption. If it helps you to actually equate that with the cereal, we can bring these in. Wheaties for wheat, Rice Krispies for rice, and corn flakes for corn, if that helps you. The thing is, where are you getting your protein from? Like when we talk about wheat in the developed world, we're mainly talking about like bread and pasta, right? We get so much wheat, we got people like trying to beat the wheat, right? Shouts out to my gluten-free folks out there. When we talk about corn, we have people very concerned about corn, not necessarily as much as like a primary food source, but like where are they putting that in in additives? Most of the corn that's grown in the world, by the way, is grown for animal feed. But like, how are they sneaking the corn in there? You know what I mean? A little high fructose corn syrup instead of my traditional sugar. That's one way, right? Okay, so let's check it out. In MDCs, you're getting your protein, for the most part, from meat. Things like pork, beef, poultry. But in LDCs, you're getting your protein from cereal grains. Not a great source of protein, by the way. Now, there are some crops that are have a decent amount of protein. Quinoa, for example, sorghum, millet, things of that nature. But that's a big difference between meat and cereal grains for how we get our proteins. Proteins is one of the big three macronutrients. You also have, carbohydrates there and fats. Look at a protein from meats, man. I tell you what. Look at that. Percentage of protein from meats. North America. Man, Argentina's really kicking it in. Western Europe, not as much. Okay, I see what's going on. A lot of meat. Shouts out to Ron Swanson. We appreciate that. They don't have the Macho Man Randy Savage slap it into a Slim Jim. Oh, yeah. That's a good commercial. You can YouTube that one. Undernourishment. Well, what happens when your energy consumption is constantly below the minimum requirement? What we said was 1,800 calories. Now, the United Nations, goodness knows, sweet people, kind people, hearts in the right place, but sometimes they struggle to do basic mathematics. So, for example, the number of people that are undernourished has been consistently going down. According to their own data from their own web page that I looked at, now it's 820 million. When your book came out, it was 850 million. But the very first thing they say on their web page is it's actually undernourishment is actually on the rise. Truth of the matter is, according to their own data, it's been consistently dropping. There may be a year or two where it kind of goes up, but it's been consistently on the decline. Remember what Hans Rosling said from Gapminder: whenever you're wondering about whether or not something's getting better or worse, it's probably getting better. The number of undernourished people continues to go down because we're finding more ways to not only consume food to increase crop yields, but also to distribute them as well. Looking at the distribution of undernourishment, right? We see large chunks in terms of total number in India, China. Matter of fact, more than half of the world's undernourished people are in South Asia and East Asia. So that does continue to be a problem. We certainly want to get to the point where no one is undernourished. And that's the goal that the United Nations set for 2030, a very lofty goal, but a very worthwhile goal. Wouldn't that be something if we got to the point where there was zero undernourishment? I think that would be awesome. That's a worthy goal. I wish them the best of luck. So to summarize here, most food is consumed in the form of cereal grains, especially wheat, rice, and maize. People in MDCs consume more calories and a higher percentage through animal products, and most humans consume more than the recommended minimum calories, but undernourishment is widespread in Asia and portions of sub-Saharan Africa. My friends, we are done. I thank you so much for jumping in this boat with me and helping me row, giving your attention to the lesson, and we will see you soon. Have a great day, and AP Human Geography is signing off, my friends.